My name is Pier Angeli LaPlace, and I am the principal at Terman Middle School in Palo Alto, California. It is a suburban public middle school close to San Francisco Bay Area. My experience in working with transgender or LGBTQ students in general, the first word that comes to mind has been varied. And by that, I mean that each person is unique, each experience, each opportunity is really unique in of itself. That's always been important for me to keep in mind, because what one transgendered student may want, or how he, she, or however they self-identify may want to be seen or work with. And the same thing with their parents or families could vary. So I always want to keep that in mind. But very specifically, this is my fourth year at the middle school where I am principal. And in my first year, I was introduced to a transgendered student who was going to be coming my second year there. I actually happened to have a good relationship already established with the parents of the student, because we were both participating in a LGBTQ committee, which was district-wide. That experience was terrific. The student had already transitioned publicly in elementary school, and very few students from that elementary school would be coming to my school. So that was one situation. Another, most recently, was that an 8th grade student, and this was second semester of his 8th grade year, and he does identify as a male. This student came to me and came to his counselor and said, I am a male, I want to transition here. Do not want to wait till I'm in high school. And he had enough trust in the culture of our school, in his counselor, in me as his principal, knowing where my heart and my stance and my dedication is. It was an honor, actually, for him to choose to transition in his 8th grade year publicly at our school. And the third is one that I'm engaging in right now. There is a student who transitioned in 4th grade, is currently a 5th grade student, and will be coming to our middle school next year. So some of those situations have most definitely come up within that context, even beginning with language. So I found that very few people on our staff or in our community were at all aware of even terminology, or the fact that in that array of gender spectrum, how people view themselves is the most important thing. For instance, I said I'm a person of color, but what I'd like to share is that I'm African American. I was born in New Orleans. I'm of Creole descent, and for me, that means Black. Most people who look at me would not see me that way, but it is my identity. And so I think that bringing that to bear in terms of supporting our students has been really crucial. So some of the process involved using, for instance, schools in transition as sort of a documentation basis, and I know Gender Spectrum was involved in creating that documentation. Helping staff to understand the urgency of needing to support our students in this particular way. I don't think there's a person on anybody's staff who comes to work and says, I want to traumatize a student. I don't want to honor and respect who they are. And yet, for me, this is one of the last bastions where people just maybe hold on to unawareness. I was going to use the term ignorance, but I'm going to be kinder than that. Hold on to their unawareness. And from that place, if you're not aware, then we can't respond in a way that really demonstrates empathy and a commitment to support. So beginning with educating the staff, educating some of our parent community in a more generalized way, because we have students on our campus who have declared themselves to be gay or bisexual. There are kids who are questioning. So this is an array of support, right? Embedding the culture. And as principal, it's really my job to establish an expectancy of acceptance, an expectancy of support for diversity, if not, which is where we need to go, celebrating it and honoring it. So let me say that I don't want to get hung up within this on terminology, right? It's a growth point for all of us. And so sometimes we feel like we're going to stumble into using that word. What I will say is that there were some very specific needs that arose out of these conversations. One of the first being when a student has already publicly transitioned, the question is, who needs to know here? That's first and foremost central to really being able to support a student. I have transitioned. I am identifying myself as fill in the blank. And in this case, it is 2 girls and 1 boy, and that is how they identify. Those are the pronouns they choose to have used. So he and she. So the first is, if a student has moved into that space of absolutely seeing themselves as who they are. So I look at you, I see a girl. That's how you choose to identify. I see a boy. That's how he is choosing to identify. Then the question becomes, who needs to know something different than that? So for the first student was a 6th grader, and we felt it was important for the core teachers, that's 2 people, in addition to the counselor and myself, to know that this student had transitioned and she was now on our campus. Outside of that, it was not a widespread, let's say, awareness. Simultaneously, we were working through Gender Spectrum, through the outlet, to get generalized awareness of this is the reality. This is the world we live in. It's the world we've always lived in. We just haven't been willing or by law able to respond or willing to respond the way we needed to. So that was one thing. Bathrooms. Let me just get front and center about facilities and bathrooms. In a middle school, campuses are large. There are many different bathrooms. There are locker rooms. There are just a whole dynamic that children or students don't face necessarily in elementary school. We have 4 bathrooms on our campus that are single stall bathrooms, besides the bathrooms that are in the office that are marked for adults or staff. So the rest of those bathrooms, those single stalls, when I got there my first year, were locked, and only a key by the staff could open them up. They were marked for adults, and they were spread in locations across our campus that if I was a student, I'd probably prefer to use myself, right? I changed that my very first year without a student who had transitioned being on our campus. It was important to me to know that the likelihood of having a student who felt like they needed to use a single stall bathroom was going to happen. And so when that student came, those bathrooms were already done. They have a label that says all gender. There is a wheelchair on it. We have students who have that level of physical need. There's Braille on it. We have a student who is sightless, and it is clear that they're opened every single morning by our morning custodians. So by the time students arrive, it's open, it's available, and it's left open throughout the day. Another one of the challenges had to do with locker rooms and ensuring that we had privacy in locker rooms so that if a student in transition or a transgendered student chose to use the locker room, he or she would be able to, they would be able to. A learning for me, actually, and again, I consider it an honor, and as a principal, as an educator, I need to always be in the learning place, a place of learning. So a learning for me was that our 8th grade student who chose to transition, he came to me and said, you know, I really appreciate that you've done this with the bathrooms. It's been this way since I've been here, but if I don't want to change in the locker room, I've got to carry my gym clothes into that bathroom and then come out changed. And then everybody sort of sees that. And it opens me to like, hey, why are you changing in there? So he requested, and I immediately, I think they were in 1 week. Lockers are now in those 4 bathrooms. They are a 1 column, 2 locker. It is one of the book lockers and not gym lockers, so it doesn't have open weave, and you can say, hey, that's what he was wearing 10 minutes ago. So you don't even know who has their clothes in there. So I appreciated that learning, that growth as well. Overnight trips were something that really needed to be addressed. In the 6th grade year, students go to science camp. In the 8th grade year, students go to DC typically. And in 7th and 8th grade year, there is a Southern California music trip, fondly known as the Disneyland trip. And so every one of the grade levels is going to encounter sleeping with other students, whether it's in a bunk, whether it's in a hotel room, and that aspect of changing and the rest. Each one of those situations, again, was handled very differently. And we had to once again say, who needs to know on this trip? Are parents going to go on this trip with the student? What needs to take place for the roommates, the other students who might be sharing a room with these students? It's a wide array of things that we need to respond to, and each time it's the place from which we're responding more so than the response. Am I seeing this as another opportunity to widen a student's sense of acceptance and belonging? Or am I seeing this as another problem I have to fix? So that to me is the most important thing. And then always staying in the listening mode. Let's go back to the student. Let's go back to their parents and let's check in with my own being. What would I want from my child? Trepidations that I initially had, concerns that I may have initially had myself, really had to do with helping a community that may not be as aware, beginning with staff. The impact that staff have on students can be so profoundly positive, and it can be profoundly negative as well. It can be a single remark, a single question, a way in which something is handled in a classroom or elsewhere. So establishing the culture, as I mentioned earlier, of respect, of appreciation, of acceptance, of learning and growing is so crucial. And so I did have an initial concern. Have I established that enough? What do I need to do more so that our students who are gender expansive, who are bringing a richness of their own diversity, right? Have I established that culture enough? And if I encounter resistance from staff, if I encounter resistance from the parents or community, how do I respond? And this is very important. That does not make them wrong for their belief, for their place that they find themselves in, That's a big challenge because there was everything in me that wanted to be fierce in those moments. And what I know is confronting someone from a place that I don't think you're right, I may think you're a bigot, any of that doesn't get us to that place of acceptance. I always have to keep in the forefront, this is about the students. How can I create kindness in the midst of this? And that meant I had to keep myself in a place of kindness, even when I met resistance, and I did. So the impact that I have observed on the students who have been supported in this way and their parents has been, I'll put it this way, heartwarming. It's why I do this work. And to see that these decisions that to me seem unequivocal, You know, they must happen, are experienced for the student who is gender expressive as an affirmation of who they are. And that, seeing that impact, I get emotional about that, because on the surface, it's a bathroom. On the surface, it's gender pronouns. On the surface, it's a survey the kids are going to take. But at a much deeper level, I can see the students look at me. They actually come and tell me that, you know, they don't have to hide. They get to be who they are. And that when I cross that campus and I see them, and again, this is their choice to be seen as girl or boy, and I say, hey guys, or I say, hey girls, how are you doing? I see smiles, because it's like, man, my principal is affirming who I am. And they know that I've taken a stand in the community. They know it. And so that is also really important. The parents, I have had parents tell me that they were afraid for their children, that they would even have bad dreams thinking something was going to happen to their child at the school. And one parent looked at me and said, I may not be able to stop everything. I'm not going to be there if somebody says a comment or does something that makes my child feel uncomfortable. But I know that you will do something about it immediately and support my child, and those bad dreams have stopped. I don't even know how to describe what that means to me and our community. I think that I want to say this too. The impact on the community of asking them to rise higher than they thought they could or would is also profound. Because if we never get another gender expansive student, if we never get another transgendered student on our campus, these changes, this culture will remain. And so I think it's been good all around. Advice that I would have for other educators seeking to do this, because whether we're proactively looking at the culture in our community, or whether an opportunity has been brought to us because here's a student on our campus, here are their parents on our campus or in our community. First and foremost is to be still and get in touch with your own biases, to check in about your own level of how this impacts you. Do a lot of listening and learning. Get educated in the places that you're unsure. Reach out to administrators who have done this work. Reach out to Joel Baum and Gender Spectrum. Reach out to the outlet, wherever you may be. There are people in your community who stand in this place, whose life work has to do with this. So educate yourself. I mentioned Schools in Transition earlier. It is a document that's been compiled by a number of different organizations, Gender Spectrum being front and center in that document. Check it out. It's online. Look to see, and it's almost like a step-by-step guide, but that aspect of checking in with yourself is important. It helps. What is the role of the principal? What happens with the school, the community, etc. And then I would say, be prepared. Be prepared to really stand in your commitment as an educator of what we need to do for our students, no matter how uncomfortable it may feel, no matter how challenging the response or resistance might be. Keep going in the direction that is right. My favorite quote is by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And to me, my role in that arc is to make sure that I am constantly moving in the direction of justice. I believe this is important work to be doing as an educator because it's front and center in what my life's commitment is and what I believe the commitment of all educators when we decided to enter into this field. I was told once, and if I'm mispronouncing it, excuse me, that the root of the word educate is educare, and it means to draw forth from within. Education has changed over time. But one thing that remains front and center is that it is an opportunity that we are helping students to learn who they are, right alongside of learning all of the academics. Who they are becoming as people is just as important as what they are learning academically. And for some students, that becoming involves a major shift in the way they are seen in the world, the way in which they are allowed to be in the world. And if I fail to support a student in becoming who they really are, then for me, the joy in this work has been removed. To draw forth from within means that I establish a place that is safe, that I establish a place in which every single student gets to be who they are. And sometimes when you're dealing with adolescents, they stumble and fall around that. But I am the solid place, the terra firma, the safe place. That is why I do this work. It is a must. This work cannot be avoided. Avoiding it means leaving somebody in pain, leaving somebody unexpressed, leaving somebody without a voice. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. It is why I get up every morning and why I do what I do. And I consider it an honor. I consider it a privilege to walk this walk with students and their parents and our community. This might sound hyperbolous, but to me, it's almost sacred.
Hi, Carlos here. To keep the conversation going, make sure you join the Gender Spectrum Lounge at genderspectrum.org/lounge. We hope to see you there.